Hi, everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today, we are diving into some of the biggest AI stories that have been making headlines recently. And these stories matter so much because I'm a big believer that we all need to educate ourselves on the context of what's going on in the AI space, because that will help us think more clearly about how to integrate AI into our own lives. And so today I'm welcoming Christopher Lint, an AI ethicist and business transformation specialist who works at the intersection of business, technology, and people. And I'm very excited to speak to you today because I almost find it quite hard to find people who really care about AI ethics and are really interested and thinking beyond the day to day. So welcome, Christopher. Would you like to start by giving us a quick overview of what you do and what sort of companies you work with?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. I always enjoy these kinds of conversations. So, in terms of me and what I do, I actually was a former, if you look at my LinkedIn, most of my background looks like it's been in corporate learning, but it's not really an accurate representation of what I've done. I've always been highly technical, but for me, it was always about how technology was changing humanity and business because it just. I mean, I've been through a lot of them. I was through the internet age, I was through the mobile age, I was through the smartphone age, and so I've just seen these big technological transformations over and over and over. And as neural networks started spinning up in 2017, I went, if this starts going, we're in for some really interesting stuff. And when the Transformers launched in 2022, I went, we are not ready for what's coming. And I went, this kind of change is a kind of change that is incredible, but could also blow up in our face if we're not really careful. And as a dad of 8, I care deeply about not just how things work out for me, but for generations to come. And so when I left my corporate role, I was the chief learning officer for a big organization. When I left about a year ago, I went, I'm just going to focus on what I've always done, which is help senior leaders think through. We're trying to make all this business change, but like, how do we do it? Because people have to come along for the ride, whether they're the customer, whether they're the employee, like people are at the end of the day are always involved with it. And so I was like, well, I guess that's going to be what I do. And a large part of that has been helping organizations, but also the tech companies go, how do you build people into the center of this? Because if you don't, we're going to lose ourselves completely. That's kind of what I've been doing for the last year. And it's been a wild adventure, to say the
And
least.
do you think that end of 2022, so we're almost 3 years since the launch of ChatGPT, do you think we've made the progress you were expecting then? Or has it gone a little bit wrong, or has it been overhyped or underhyped?
So it's really interesting, and I do a ton of work studying the different research that's coming out, and not just to look at the stats, but to study the human patterns of behavior in it. And one of the things that's, I guess, a little unsettling is we've adopted this technology faster than any technology ever before. Like we're less than 3 years in, and basically everybody's using it. For that transformative of a technology to already have that scale of adoption, where it's literally like people are using ChatGPT to work through arguments in their marriage. They're also using it to build strategy decks at work. Like it has a level of integration that I did not think we would have in 3 years. I thought, the usual tech adoption curve is there. So in some ways, it's like, whoa, okay, we're further than I thought. But where that gets concerning, I think, is when you actually look at how people are using it. It has this like massive adoption and everything, and yet people are using it very carelessly, and they're kind of like offloading their thinking, and they're like, I don't know, whatever AI says, I'll do. And I'm like, whoa, like hold the phone, folks. Like, but they don't even really understand how AI works. So they're putting their trust in something they don't fundamentally understand. And that's the part where I'm like, we're moving faster than I thought we would, but also in some ways, we aren't keeping pace with what we need to do for that kind of adoption. And that's the part that's unsettling.
I would absolutely agree. I feel like recently, like over the past 10, 20 years, generally, we've become more infantilized as a society. We look to a grown up to tell us what to do, whether that's our government or our boss or our parents or whatever it is. And I feel like we're just ready to be led by something, and AI is stepping into the breach. And I think if you look at a really good example is the Harvard Business Review article about AI workslop that came out, I think, about a week ago. And it's based off a study that was conducted at Harvard, which they're trying to put a cost on the amount of time being wasted by just junky content being created by AI and then being sent to people who now have to deal with and interpret and manage the awkwardness of someone who used to be competent sending you something quite rubbish. And they've put that at, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of caveats to this number, but they've put that at $189 per employee per month. But what do you think is the cause of this like mass explosion of AI works?
I when I look around at just the state of the world, because I don't just look at the technology piece, I also just kind of look at these societal, geopolitical trends that are going on. And then coming out of COVID, it's like they're fried. They're just exhausted. And when you're fatigued and your nerves from outrage have just been frazzled to the point where you're like, I just literally don't know if I can take it anymore. Going back to what you said before, an AI savior sounds really appealing, where it's like, oh my gosh, finally something that can just like do my thinking for me, do my like, I don't want to think about the answer to that question anymore. Just, I don't know, AI, tell me what to say to this. And it tells you, and it sounds good enough. So you're like, okay, sure, send it along. I'm not really going to even check it. And so when I think about like what's causing some of this work slop, I think that's a big part of it, because people are just they're tired and they don't. But then you combine that with the fact, if you look at most jobs, if you ask most people like what what do you do that contributes to the organization, and like they wouldn't be able to tell you. They'd tell you what they do every day, like, well, I do this and I do that. But if you were like, but how does that contribute to what your organization's vision is, they'd be like,
Yeah.
so you're tired, you're frazzled, you're overwhelmed, you're stressed out about what's going on in the world, and you're not really clear on what you're supposed to do anyway. AI just seems great. It seems
An
like a
easy
wonderful thing.
solution.
Yeah, it's an easy solution to your problem. And you're like, I don't know, fine, sure, take it over. And the part that's scary for I think senior leaders, I'm trying to like warn them all the time, is I'm like, it does good enough that it's very hard to detect until literally the foundation is rotten out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is being fueled by the media
Yes.
constantly talking about AI is going to take your jobs. AI is going to take your jobs. So everyone's like, AI is taking my job and handing their jobs over to AI without
Yeah.
any sort of, it's maybe a bit premature to be doing that and without any sort of thinking about, well, like, is it okay for my job to be done 30% worse? Like, maybe, and in some instances it is okay, but don't do it without asking the question.
Right. Well, and I think the other thing with that is it's like parts of the job be fine to be done 30% less effective. It's like every job needs to go through that transformation. But to your point, I think it's almost like because of the headlines, because of what, quite frankly, reckless CEOs are doing, it's the same thing you see when a company announces layoffs are coming. Everybody just kind of goes, whatever. Okay, well, I'm going to show up and do just enough to not get fired until I feel like we're on the other side of this and I know whether there's some sort of stability or not. But the problem with AI is nobody really knows where or when that's even coming or if it's even coming. So you have an entire workforce that's basically kind of like set cruise control, reclined to their chair, set autopilot, and is like, all right, well, wake me up when either I'm gone or something
Yeah.
stable shows up.
And they, as you say, after the pandemic, people were already disengaged. They were working from home. They were frustrated. Most people had a bit of a rough time over that period. And now this is almost like an answer, but it also furthers that level of disengagement. So if we move on to the MIT
Hmm.
study recently, and I have a few issues with the study. So this
I
is
do
a
too.
study. Good. Okay. Interesting.
I
This
do
is a
too.
study that has been cited widely. 95% of AI projects fail, deliver zero ROI. But nobody, I was just reading the study now, and they interviewed
That's not what
53
the study
companies.
says. That's the thing. That's
No.
not even what the study says. It's like it tanked the stock market. Like people are making decisions on this, and it's like that's not even what the study said. That's
So,
like
what
one
does the
tiny
study
piece.
say? Why don't you summarize what the study does say and what you've taken away from it?
Yeah. So one of the big things that I took from it that nobody's talking about is that 90% of employees are using AI on a day-to-day basis. I'm like, okay, so that in itself kind of contradicts this whole like, oh, it's a cosmic waste, because that's
Yeah.
how it's been framed, is like it's just this cosmic waste, it's a waste of time, it's not going to do anything. It's like, yet everybody relies on it every day. You're going to call that a waste. But then the 95% is like, that's for targeted pilots. If you look at any sort of experimental pilot, the uh, the success rate is dismal, but that's the point. It's a pilot. You're like, does this work? I don't know. Like, we're gonna see what happens. It's the point is to learn. It's not to say we got 100%. So to me, that was where it was really frustrating, because I'm like, that's not. You're kind of architecting that. And if you've ever been involved in an innovation group, which I've done a ton of work there, one of the biggest opportunity areas is most of the time people don't really always think through, like, what are we hoping to accomplish? What does good look like? Like,
Yeah.
and now you throw in a very ambiguous technology that we really don't know what to do. Like, yes, you're going to have a high failure rate. I can tell you that when I do AI adoption or pilots, we don't have a 95% fail rate. So I even know, I'm like, this is not how it actually goes. But yes, if you look across the corporate sphere of just the chaos of things, it's going to be high, but in an area that already should be very high. And then even in the report, there's another stat that says 40% of general AI actually is really successful. Like, it's showing improvements. The whole thing is like, folks, you got to actually read what's underneath all this. You can't just go,
Yeah.
heard MIT said AI is a failed experiment.
I agree. I mean, I think firstly the study was based on interviews with executives from 50 something companies. I mean, it's not exactly this like wide ranging
No,
representative sample. It's really, really
it's
tiny.
very small.
And I agree. I think a lot of AI adoption has been, and was something that I recommend to anyone who asks me, any founder or business owner who asks me, I always say, get the basics right, get people using AI within your business, and then let them experiment and
Yes.
find the things that will add value for your business, because that will emerge when people experiment. But of course, that is not the same as testing a hypothesis and saying, we are going to try this, and then we will know if this has moved by this many points, or this much, this metric has changed, or this KPI has changed. We will know it's been successful. And if it hasn't, we will not know it's been successful. But one of the things that I found really interesting about that study is there's a good chance that people are benefiting from AI, but that benefit isn't accruing to the business, it's accruing to the employees. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. We haven't worked out the ethics of this. Like, who should benefit from ChatGPT? Your employer or you? Or should you get 10% of the benefit and your employer gets 90%? Or how much are you giving away? How much of your thinking? How much of your thought processes? So I just think that's one of the ethical minefields that we haven't really navigated yet.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point on that, that's why you see a 40% success rate with general LLMs, is because people are like, this is actually pretty helpful. Like, it's helping me get some things done, and I'm feeling more effective in what I'm doing. And then you've got an executive at the top who is already disconnected from the work and is bought into these promises that AI is like magically going to fix everything. yeah, you do a small sample study of them. Of course, they're going to go, yeah, it didn't really work. We spent millions of dollars on this pilot and didn't get anything. Like, how do you? It's just, yeah, I've got major issues with the study. I mean, it's a
Absolutely.
good study. That's the thing. I think even the people involved in the research would go, the way this is being represented is not even the conclusions we drew on this, which is true of pretty much every research study you ever see.
Well, every study about Ozempic for sure, like results
Yes.
in some sensational headline, and this is no different.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
absolutely. And I also think that with this MIT study, that there was, when you look at executives, like senior executives, they are so used to finding somebody else to handle this challenge and waiting to see what comes back. Whereas I think AI is different. AI is everybody's got to upskill, educate, work out what's going on. And often the senior executives are not the people who are doing that. They're just not naturally inclined to do that. And I had a really good example a few weeks ago where I had somebody contact me about building the kind of AI skills within his business, which isn't really what I do, but he wanted to kind of talk about it. But then when we got on the call, he brought a junior who's leading their AI strategy. She's fresh out of university. She can't lead there. She can help, but she can't. He has to lead it. The CEO has to lead it. And I think that it's going to take a bit of time for boards and executives to catch up. They've got to be the students again and get up to speed as much as everybody else.
Well, and I consistently see that in my coaching and advising work is I get brought in and it's like, okay, so like what are they all going to do? And I'm like, what do you want them to do? I've like I'm waiting for them to figure out what AI is going to transform. I'm like, no, you have to have a vision for what you're trying to do and then you need to say everybody, this is where we're going. I need you to figure out how does AI help us get there faster, better, more effectively. Like, you got to lead. And they're like, I don't know what AI does. I'm like, that's the problem. You don't go, what do we do with AI? You say, what are we doing? How does AI help with that? And that to me
Absolutely.
is one of the biggest disconnects I see in come. Everybody's trying to build an AI strategy. And I'm like, there might be like one person in your company who has a responsibility that's figuring out like what platforms do we need? Do we build an internal LLM? Do we, just API? Like, yeah, you have one group focused on that, but like the rest of you, what are you doing building an AI strategy?
Yeah.
It's very strange. And it's splitting their attention. It's a gross misunderstanding of the tech.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often say that you can't treat it like a task because it rewrites the whole task. It's rewritten the whole task list. This isn't a task that you get to. This is our task list was on that page and now it's on that page over there. And we've got to go sort that out and work out
Yes.
what it looks like now. So speaking of AI strategies and AI projects, the KPMG 100-page AI prompt, for their
Mhm.
tax bot in Australia. So, for anybody who doesn't know about this, KPMG in Australia built the beginnings of a tax bot, which was large language model. I think it had a RAG fusion model attached to it, and they fed it this 100-page prompt that presumably contained a lot of tax law and a lot of how to interpret tax law and advise clients. And supposedly, this 100-page prompt was then used by tax advisors to speed up the process with which they could produce tax advice. And it's been absolutely panned. I was quite surprised by the reaction to it because people have said it's a gimmick, it's never going to work, that's not how you use AI. But to me, that seems like a pretty good exercise. And actually, if it was 10 years ago, writing it into a book, writing a 100-page book on how KPMG handles tax law, good idea. So I
Yes.
don't really understand the negative press around it.
Neither. I was blown away by the number of people that are like, either one, they're like, this is so stupid, or they were like, they're just creating their job replacement. I'm like, what? Do you not know how this works? Like, just in the traditional days, if you made an SOP document, you didn't end your job. Like, that was just a good business practice.
Yeah.
What do we do? what does it look like? What is some of the things we, go through on a regular basis so that we can it's process mapping. That's why I was surprised when people like thought it was dumb. I'm like, they get it. That's the crazy like this is an example of somebody who gets what to do with AI.
Absolutely. And the fact there was no indication that KPMG is planning on firing all of its tax
No, they
advisors.
literally said they literally when I went through the thing and the whole thing behind it was, "No, this is the goal of that is not this. It's so" their exact quote was, "So our people can focus on the chewy problems."
Yeah,
They're
and
like, "The
do so
goal of this."
faster.
Yeah, they're like, "We just want to we know that there's like 60% of stuff that it's the same every time, and we just historically waste all our time going through these exact same steps, and we, put things here and we create this there, and then we pull these files and we do all this." So we just said, well, what if we could speed that up because we don't have enough time to focus on these complex, like, oh, wow, we really ran into something we've never seen before. Usually we don't have time for that because we're too busy on that. I'm like, yeah, they're not planning on wiping out their people. They're
No.
planning on refocusing them on where they make the most value for KPMG. And hopefully those people get the most enjoyment out of the job they got into. To me, I
Yeah.
thought it was a brilliant case study. I was like, this
Yeah.
is wonderful. Everybody should be doing this.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Oh, that's very interesting. And in terms of the kind of macro question, do you think that we are in an AI bubble? We've just had the post-pandemic bubble. Are we now in an AI bubble? And like, what's your take? Is it fragile or are we in a boom with staying power?
I think it's complicated. I think that's the challenge is there are absolutely aspects of this that are going to pop and a lot of people are going to get hurt. I hate that. That's why I do so much of the work I do is because I'm like, we don't have to do this. Like we don't have to put ourselves. And that's the part that's frustrating right now is I literally feel like we're standing up everything on a house of cards knowingly. And I'm like, what are you doing? Because there are elements of this. Like when I hear companies go, we're eliminating 30% of our employees. And I'm like, where did you get that number? Well, it's kind of like the number everybody's shooting for right now. I'm like, you're and it's already happening. There's a whole industry being stood up now of people who are going to come in. You hire them, and I get called about it. You get hired to come clean up the AI messes. Like it's an industry now. Like, well, AI blew all this up. I think there's also a ton of big promises. Kind of like COVID, how all the virtual companies in 2020 and 2021, it was like they were just you could just say I'm a virtual company and VC threw you money and it was like great, it's going to be wonderful. And then they all collapsed once that wasn't sustainable. So I think there's going to be some of that collapse that absolutely is going to happen. In terms of like the collapse of will we fall into an AI winter, there's no way. It's so far integrated into absolutely every fiber of everybody's existence that it's like it's not going to pop in that sense. I think there's going to be this really painful shift. And the one I'm concerned about, going back to the ethical piece, is like we haven't learned our lessons from some of these big transformations. 20 some years later, we're looking at social media going, wow, like, holy crap, we were not. And I'm like, hello, AI is social media on steroids. I
Yeah.
mean, we're only not even 3 years in, and we're already seeing alarm bells ringing left and right, like, "Hey, this is really like, hey, this is we didn't have that with social media. 3 years into Facebook, nobody was like, "Whoa, guys, this is not good. Like, we gotta mitigate some of these risks." So, I say all the time, AI is an amplifier, the most powerful amplifier we've ever seen in human history, and that's the part that I'm like, that bubble like, I don't want us to have to pop that, but we seem kind of determined to see how far we can blow up the balloon, and I'm
Yeah.
like, it does pop. It will pop, but we don't seem to be thinking about like, well, let's make sure it doesn't explode all over us.
Which is a very scary thought. So, in terms of the work that you do with companies, you've got your AI effectiveness rating. Can you walk
Yeah.
through an example of how a company might actually use that in practice?
Yeah. So one of the things there's kind of two big use cases that a lot of people are looking at. Because right now every company has this pressure of like, we need our employees to be using AI, but it's very poorly defined. If you're like using it, what do you mean? Well, like, you know, translate all the usual buzzwords, this and that. And if you ask them, well, how are they using it today? Like nobody knows. So like you want them to get better at a thing that you haven't defined, that you also haven't even defined like what is it and what does it mean to do it well. And when I looked at so much, and just because of my background, when I looked at so much of the challenges organizations face is they don't really understand what people do. And so as they're thinking about AI, you'll see like prompt engineering. We need prompt engineers. You're like, well, what does that mean? And so that was where I said, look, I'm going to develop a clear standard of what does it mean to use AI effectively so that companies can start to say, where are our people? Where should they be? And what do we need to do to get them there? So, in terms of practical use cases, some of it is in recruiting and hiring. Not that you're eliminating candidates based on a score, but if you're trying to say, like, does this person know how to use AI well? I mean, that's kind of an important thing if you're saying like it's a mandatory job requirement. So
Yeah.
that's one area that's big, is just to kind of help get a pulse, not only for the person, so that they get kind of a blueprint of like, here's how well I'm using it, here's where I could grow, but also for the company to go, if we hire this person, like these are areas that their manager should be developing them on, or we should make sure we lean into. Then, as you can imagine, internally, it's used to say, I mean, we've got Gemini, we got Copilot, we have some of these tools, but do our people have any idea how to drive? We handed them a Ferrari. I don't know if they know how to drive a stick. What are they using it for? Like, I have no idea. And so it's to try and give some grounding of, here's 6 disciplines that are crucial to using AI well. Here's how to measure them on a behavioral standard that people can translate. Now, and I really tell, I'm like, this is not to give people a number so you can get rid of them. It's to help them understand, here's where you are today, here's where you need to be if you want to be effective with AI. And so that's where companies are using it. They're using it in small teams. Some are using it across the enterprise. Recruiting teams are saying, hey, this should be part of, because it takes 15 minutes.
That's interesting. Okay, thank you. And how can people find out more? And if they want to get in touch and access your AI readiness, AI effectiveness rating?
Yeah, the biggest thing that, because I'm kind of all over when it comes to social media and things like that. So if people go to my website, christopherlin.co, that's where it's like the jumping point for everything. If you want to find out about the work I do, you can find, if you want to find my content on the different platforms, that's really the best place for people to find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really interesting. And if you're watching, please leave a comment on which of these stories makes you the most concerned about AI or the most kind of concerned about the future. Thanks so much, Christopher.
Thanks for having me.